Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting both Jake and I here to your annual meeting. We've done this several years in a row, and it's always a pleasure for us to be here. So let me just introduce myself. I'm Lydia Tadone. I'm from Simsbury, Connecticut, and I've been on my board for about 27 years there. I'm also past president of my state association, CABE. So you're really not too far away, but I know this is the Massachusetts show after Glenn spoke and so many things. But let me give you a couple little insights just in Connecticut. We recently elected a new governor and who poised himself as the education governor. Well, with that being said, our education commissioner retired as soon as he took office, so he has yet to appoint a new education commissioner. And so with that being said, we have very similar problems as you do in Rhode Island and in Massachusetts. But one of the big things that this new education governor proposed, and it's been a war, is about regionalization with districts. So what he proposed early on was that districts that had less than 3,000 students, which are most of Connecticut's districts except for the big urbans, and populations of less than 30,000 would all regionalize in the entire state. Well, you know what that means is that, you know, he wants to solidify the superintendents, and but that just went up in smoke from day one. And I got to tell you, being at the Capitol, there was so much controversy and opposition about this. So there's the watered down bill of that, and that we have 6 weeks to go in our legislature. So that's so much for the education of governor and what he proposed. So that's it. And I also, one thing too, I was just Googling a little bit about, we have casinos in Connecticut, the Mashantucket at Pequot and Mohegan, so many of you may have been there. They've been in operation since 1997. So when we were talking about the funding before, we have yet to see any money. Where do you think that money goes? Back to the state coffers, back to the general fund. We have 162 districts in Connecticut, school districts. We have not seen that money, so much for that, you know, casino and lottery money. But with that being said, I'm here to represent as a member of the Northeast region on the Board of Directors for NSBA, and we recently had our annual conference in Philadelphia. Many of your executive board and state leaders attended that, and the annual conference, if any of you are ever able to attend or have an interest, I would really highly recommend it. It is for all educational leaders, boards of ed, superintendents, anyone in education to attend. It is a 4-day extravaganza. It's education on high-octane steroids, and we have about 6,000 attendees. Next spring will be in Chicago, and so we had 6,000 people attending. We had 350 workshop sessions, etc. We had phenomenal keynote speakers, and we had 500 exhibitors. But it's just a way for all of us in education around the country to be under one convention center together. And it's a big thought process, and you come home with so much valued information that, you know, it's something you can learn and share with your districts. So next year, Chicago, spring of 2020, and hopefully many of you will have the opportunity to attend. So with that being said, I want to just address something that came out of the conference, and many of your state association leaders who had been there, and I know Peggy and John were there. But with NSBA, we had a listening session before the delegate assembly, and in that listening session, we heard a lot of issues, concerns that were affecting all the state associations, yours included. And so coming out of that listening session, the board of directors, of which Jake and I are on, we have established a governance committee. And that governance committee is comprised of several state association directors, past presidents, past board members, other Board of Education members around the country, and me. I am the representative as a sitting board member in NSBA on that committee. So the governance committee is really charged with now looking at a lot of issues that have affected membership, from equity, from financial, from board responsibility to governance to a number of things. We heard loud and clear from our state associations of what they expect, the value added, in terms of membership. The Delegate Assembly in Philadelphia recently passed the new due structure for all our state associations. So our charge, and we're going to be working very hard up until December when we have to, report out to the board of directors of what we're going to be doing. So shortly, we'll be contacting, or I'll be contacting your state association leaders, and they'll be contacting you as Board of Ed members in your local district about what do you see, where do you see the direction of NSBA going. Many of you may not be familiar with it, and what we do in DC, we are the Washington office of your state associations put together, for advocacy, for legislation, serving our members, which are state associations. So this is something new that the Board of Directors, this is the first time we're establishing this basically National Governance Committee, and we hope to become more transparent with our state associations. We listen to you, we understand what is going on, and we want to serve you better. So that's going to be my work for the next several months, and I hope to hear from some of you, and I know Tim and Peggy have my information, to reach me, but please do, think about it. Think of things you need us as representatives, to bring back to the NSBA board when we meet in Washington. So with that, I'm going to give it to Jake.
Well, thank you, Lydia, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jake Oliveira. I joined Lydia, as well as another member of the Northeast region, Devin Sheehan, who is also from Massachusetts. The three of us represent the 11 states and the one territory. What is that one territory? Virgin Islands. I don't know how it made its way into the Northeast region, but it has. And we represent you on the National School Boards Association Board of Directors. I'm quite familiar with Rhode Island. This is actually the second weekend in a row I'm actually in your great state. Last weekend, I was here for a bachelor party. Not my own, someone else's, but yeah, we spent a lot of time at Twin Rivers. Several of us were successful. I'm very disappointed to hear that none of the revenue that we dropped over there is actually going to your schools instead of the general fund. We also visited a few other establishments that will go unnamed. I don't know if any revenue from those institutions make their way to schools, but they definitely should. Just to give you piggyback on Lydia's comments, and also Glenn Kuchar, who is our executive director in Massachusetts, described before, some of the challenges that all three of our states face are very similar. Funding issues continue to plague each one of our states. Massachusetts has had historically greater levels of funding than some of our surrounding states at the state level. But I think the commonality between all of us, and the question I think you had asked before about revenue sources, something that all of us are facing, whether at the municipal level, the school district level, and at the state level, is the growing cost of health care. And so the growing cost of healthcare is squeezing that pie of revenue of all of our states more and more each year. Even though Massachusetts has a growing economy, a thriving economy, east of Worcester, I'd say, that economy is, and those revenue sources that are generated by that economy are going farther and farther towards healthcare and less towards education. And until we tackle the issue of healthcare, there's going to be less within our states, within our local communities, and less at the federal level that we can spend on worthy investments like in education. When we look at some of the other issues that are plaguing us in Massachusetts right now, we do have a great disparity. Even though we lead the nation, the disparity between some of our urban school districts and our school districts that are more affluent is some of the highest in the nation. Those are some of the issues that we're talking about. But when we look at revenue in Massachusetts, the number one source of revenue for us is our state income tax. It's a flat percentage, a little bit over 5% right now. It slid down from 6% in the early 2000s to about 5.3% right now. There's actually a proposal on the table that's going to be debated within the next, I'd say, year or so, that would place an income tax surcharge for earned income over $1 million a year. And the funds generated by that, which could be close to $2 billion, would be directly earmarked towards education and transportation. Two issues that, as you know in an economy are things that are essential to growing business. So on the local side, those are some of the issues that all of us face. But looking at the work that we do on the NSBA Board of Directors, the NSBA organization, and if you don't know about NSBA, I'd encourage you to go to nsba.org. As your state association runs things, your lobbying, your legal efforts here at the state level in Rhode Island, NSBA at the national level is your voice up on Capitol Hill. It's your voice before the courts, and it's your voice before public policy issues that are impacting all of our states together. So the Confederation of NSBA, made up of 49 states, Hawaii is not part of us. Hawaii actually is one board for all the islands within it, so they aren't a member, but the Virgin Islands is, so we round out at 50. And what we've been doing over the past several years is really investing heavily in the advocacy role as an organization. As many of you know, the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act popped out about 2 years ago. It gave greater flexibility to states and local school districts. It tried to alleviate some of the high-stakes testing and mandates that No Child Left Behind had established in the early 2000s, and that bill actually had a lot of provisions that NSBA included for local school districts on there. A big campaign that we just launched this past January is a campaign on IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which was authorized back in 1975. It provides about 16% of the cost of high-need special education students for local school districts nationwide, but it hasn't been reauthorized and it hasn't been fully funded. So the campaign that we're working on right now is up on the NSBA website. I'd encourage you to go on there, take a look at it, engage with your federal legislators, your 2 congressmen and your 2 senators. This is something that's uniquely important. Even though the percentage is very small of funding that comes from the federal government, particularly for Northeast states, high cost of living states, that funding for IDEA is very important for some of our high-cost students that all of our school districts are seeing a growing population of. The second area of public policy that we're really investing a lot of time on right now is something that's going to be coming up in less than a year from now, the 2020 census. And I know you folks in Rhode Island are uniquely aware of the census right now. I think a lot of reports have said that you might be losing a congressional seat down from 2 to 1 right now. That's something that should be very concerning to you, not just on your representation at the federal level, but also your share of federal funds, whether it's Title I funds, whether it's IDEA. All the information that's collected in the census is something that's very important. So getting an accurate count in all of our school districts, especially our urban school districts, which tend to be underrepresented in the census, is something that NSBA is providing resources out to states and how school districts can help in that census counting to ensure that all of our populations are actually accounted for in that census. And then the last area that I'm going to highlight is an area that deals with career and technical education. We've heard a lot about financing. We've heard a lot about school finance. We've heard a lot about college and career readiness. But NSBA is launching an initiative looking at career technical education skills and some of those skills that you can develop early on with a high school diploma.
We always have new publications that are being published that are out there. They're free. They're for any member of a Board of Education around the country, and it will give you an insight, in particular, some of the issues that you may be dealing with in your state or Massachusetts or Connecticut or any other state that is a member. So we thank you for your any comments that you have and insights and recommendations that we could better serve you representing the Northeast, which is all of New England and Delaware and Maryland and Pennsylvania and New York and New Jersey. So thanks very much for your time.
We have one question right there.
I'm just curious, because you mentioned the growth in IDEA population. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's, several things. So I can look locally and what what goes on in my local school district. So we border I'm in the western part of the state. So western Massachusetts, we border the second largest school district in New England, Springfield, which has about 27,000 students. My school district, about 2,800 students. I think part of the reason is we're getting better at identifying certain needs early on. And so we've invested heavily in intervention levels, right from pre-K to K to 1 and 2. And so we were seeing some issues that bubble up. It's early identification, and the more resources I think that we can pack in those early years, the better off it is long-term for the students, for their families. The other thing that we've tried to do in our local school district is also retain more of our special education students. There are very expensive private programs throughout all of New England. You know, you can have a student that could cost the district up to $200,000, $300,000 a year for some of these programs. I think school districts are looking at the cost of those programs and seeing what they can do locally. And so retaining those students locally, but it is expensive. And in Massachusetts, we actually have a pot of fund called a Special Education Circuit Breaker that provides funding for anything above and beyond, you know, the average per student cost. So I think, but it hasn't been fully funded, so don't give us too much credit in Massachusetts. But those issues, I think, are rising right now. And as we see, you know, federal help, like we said before, federal help is icing on the cake. 16% of the cost of educating some of those students is provided by the feds. Most of it is coming from our local school districts and the state. Any other questions? All right then, well, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.